Good afternoon. Today I'm going to be reviewing the Cadisen C8206. This watch is available from Cadisen official store on AliExpress for €157. So firstly, let's look at the box that the watch comes in, and then I'll talk you through the other items one gets with the piece. So the watch comes in a watch box which is protected by this white cardboard outer sleeve one removes, and this is the watch box. The watch sits underneath a protective panel in the base inside a foam cutout panel, as one would expect. So although basic, it does suffice in protecting the watch in shipping from any damage, and I think it's perfectly acceptable to use a cardboard watch box, bearing in mind this is a low tier price point piece at €157. This is the owner's instruction manual. Although basic, it does suffice in detailing the operation of the Seiko NH35A automatic. Clear concise diagrams and the instructions are in English. One also gets this guarantee card, and I'm pleased to report the C8206 is covered by a 12-month international warranty. This is the screwdriver that comes with the watch for resizing the 1.6mm screw pins in the rivet link bracelet. And lastly, one also gets this Cadisen branded microfiber polishing cloth. I always think it's a nice touch to get a branded microfiber polishing cloth, irrespective of the price point of a piece. So, with regards to the specifications of the piece, this is the Cadisen C8206. The watch is available in several dial colour options. White you're looking at here, blue, which I've previously reviewed, black and also Tiffany blue. So with regards to the dimensions, we have a 38mm case diameter, we have a 45.4mm lug-to-lug measurement, a thickness of 12.9mm and a lug width of 20mm. The rivet link bracelet tapers from 20mm at the lugs down to 18mm at the flip lock clasp. I think they've made a mistake with this. They should have tapered it from 20 down to 16, which is the perfect taper for a 38mm head of the piece. 20 to 18 just isn't enough because the bracelet looks straight and parallel rather than looking like it's tapered. For a 38mm head of the piece, 20 to 16 would have been more aesthetically pleasing. Now, with regards to the clasp, as you can see, it's signed with Cadisen, engraved to a good standard, beautiful lustre to the 316L grade stainless steel, and that contrasts with the mirror polishing to the flanks. But however, they've made an error to the solid milled flip-lock clasp. If you look at the underside, we have 2 rows of 3 dimples inside the body, so there's meant to be 3 micro adjustments. But they've made the mistake of the rivet links in the last 2 links of the bracelet are too wide to slide inside. The rivets prevent the end links sliding into the body of the clasp, so one cannot actually use the 3 micro adjustment positions. Now, I understand that Cadisen have acknowledged the error and they are now producing new bracelets. So the V2 bracelets will have 2 oyster style links in the end of the bracelet versus these rivet links, and therefore the 2 oyster style links will be able to slide inside the body of the clasp, and one will be able to use the 3 dimples, the 3 micro adjustment positions. But it's disappointing they didn't recognise this before producing the bracelets and releasing the watch for sale on AliExpress via their resellers. And I think this is a fundamental that they should be getting correct. I also think the flip lock clasp is undersized. It looks too short. It would be better if they'd made it longer as per the Pagani Design PD1661 clasp, which is the correct proportion. This just looks too short. The other negative is there is no on-the-fly adjustment. We don't have a 5mm EasyLink style extension as per the PD1661 clasp, so there is room for improvement. They should scale up the proportions and make it longer, but it's good they're addressing the defects of having the rivet links in the end of the bracelet. They're changing it to oyster links. With regards to the rest of the specification, we have a flat sapphire crystal. Now, the negative of the flat sapphire crystal is there is no AR coating on the underside, and it really does need anti-reflective coating, because when I tilt the piece at an oblique angle, you can see it is highly reflective. There is a lot of glare from the mirror polished applied indices and the silver mirror polished Mercedes handset. This would have looked better had they used black applied indices and a black Mercedes handset, because the black indices and black hands would contrast better with a matte white dial. Really, it's a clash because they've used black text for the Cadisen logo and the text on the 6 o'clock position of the dial, and also it has a black chapter ring with 60-minute ticks. Black indices and black Mercedes handset would complement the chapter ring and also the black text. Using silver and black with white, it really does clash rather than complement. So I think that the legibility could be improved, and of course without the AR coating you can see that black would also help, because it wouldn't be as shiny and reflective as the silver mirror polishing on the indices and the Mercedes hands. Now the other mistake they've made is the Rehort is mirror polished, so it acts like a 360-degree mirror. When light enters the sapphire crystal, it reflects off the underside of the sapphire crystal, the indices and the Mercedes hands, and this is then compounded by the 360-degree mirror effect of the mirror polished Rehort. If they'd brushed satin finished the Rehort, it would have refracted the light rather than reflecting it, and that would reduce some of the reflective nature of the sapphire crystal. So really a brush satin finish Rehorts would have been more effective. Mirror polished Rehorts don't look very good. The other thing is it exacerbates the fact it's a deep Rehort. This is an NH35A powered piece, so there is a large gap between the underside of the crystal and the dial. And using a brush satin finish Rehort disguises the fact it's a deep Rehort. And of course if this were PT5000 powered, it would be a more shallow gap. There would be less of a gap between the crystal and the dial. So mirror polished Rehorts really do show the depth of the Rehorts because it's more reflective, it reflects the dial and the handset, and it really is a very shiny and reflective piece. So it's a shame they used the cost-cutting measure of no AR coating and then compounded it with silver indices and silver hands rather than black and the mirror polished Rehort. So with regards to the crown, it's solid 316L grade stainless steel, nailed finish, mirror polished domed cap, and we have the Cadisen emblem embossed to a good standard. So let's test the screw down crown execution. The screw down crown provides an effective hermetic seal to 200 meters, which is good specification. So it feels stiff, it doesn't feel silky smooth. There is resistance in the O-rings, and also one can feel the friction of the internal thread interfacing with the external thread of the stainless steel crown tube. So it's not as smooth as a steel dive SD1953 or a Pagani design PD1661, which this is competing with. So there is room for improvement. It is possible at circa €150 to make a silky smooth crown as per the SD1953 and the PD1661, for example. In the first position, it's the manual wind position, and one can manually wind the NH35A automatic to top it up to its maximum 40-hour power reserve. So it's an absolute pleasure to manually wind the 35A. One can feel the tension in the mainspring gradually building up. Pulling it out to the first click position is the date setting position. There is a date wheel present beneath the dial, although this lacks a date complication, and rotating the crown anti-clockwise in the first click position, one can feel the quick set date complication clicking over. So I think they've made a mistake. They should have used the NH38, and that would have deleted the phantom date setting position and the date wheel. Pulling it out to the second click position is the time setting position, and as you can see I have now hacked the movement. It's possible to hack the second hand to set the time precisely to the second. No back play clockwise and anti-clockwise, nice light resistance, which is a characteristic of the 35A. Feels very smooth, and it's an absolute pleasure to set the time. Pushing it back in restarts the movement with a nice positive click, so let's test screwing the crown back down. Now on a positive note, the internal thread of the stainless steel crown picks up with the external thread of the stainless steel crown tube well, so the interface between the threads is good. One thing I like about the 35A is there is less resistance required. One doesn't have to push in the crown and winding stem with as much force as the PT5000, so it's more pleasant to use when manually winding and more pleasant to screw it back down. So the threading just isn't silky smooth. There is more friction than on a PD1661 and the SD1953. There is room for improvement on the machining of the threads, and also the rubber O-rings feel tight. They're not as smooth, so really I think they need to improve on the crown. With regards to the bezel, it's a ceramic bezel insert inlaid with white paint, minute 6, and also the Arabic numerals are also all inlaid. Matte finish to the ceramic, which is aesthetically pleasing, and the crown has a gear tooth profile rather than a coin edge finish to it. The teeth to the gear tooth bezel are finished to a good standard, no sharp edges, no burrs to the top edge, so it is finished to a good standard. So let's test the 120 click unidirectional bezel execution. It feels rough. It doesn't feel even all the way through the 360 degrees. It feels tight and then loose and then tight again. And it has some sticking points. It has some rough points in it which feel gritty. So it's not a smooth, even 120 clicks. It goes tight and loose. We have lateral side-to-side play. I'm just going to check it in various positions to confirm. Yes, we have lateral side-to-side play all the way around the 360 degrees. We also have one click of back play, as you can see, in every position, all the way around the 360 degrees. So it's a very sloppy bezel because we have significant lateral side-to-side play and significant back play, and the cumulative effect, they compound each other. The side-to-side play and also the back play work against each other, so it's a very loose bezel. And also the resistance is variable, tight and loose. So lastly, I'll just check the alignments. Now, on a positive note, the loom pip and triangle does align correctly with a 60-minute tick at 12 o'clock and the 12 o'clock index, but of course, due to the one click of back play and the lateral side-to-side play, the loom pip and triangle move out of position, as you can see, because it's a loose bezel. So one can initially get the loom pip and triangle to align, but then of course it rocks out of position because it has one click of back play and also lateral side-to-side play. So disappointing bezel execution, and there is room for improvement. With regards to the case back, it's solid 316L grade stainless steel. It provides an effective hermetic seal to 200 metres, engraved to a good standard with the specification. The centre section is sterile and longitudinally brushed satin finished, no sharp edges, no burrs, coin edge finished, low profile, bubble back profile, rather than being flat. It is smooth and it does feel comfortable to wear against the wrist for long periods of time, such as 8 to 12 hours per day. So it's a well executed screw down stainless steel case back. The solid end links, which are female pivoted end links, are a good tight fit to the head of the piece. The underside to the head of the piece is finished to a good standard, no sharp edges, no burrs to the tips of the lugs or the underside to the flanks. So I'll give you a wrist shot and you can see how it fits on my 8-inch wrist. Now, I haven't sized the bracelet, I've simply taken the watch out of the watch box, and as you can see it fits my 8-inch wrist with no difficulty whatsoever. I can easily slip an index finger underneath the bracelet and clasp at all times, so this will fit up to an 8.5-inch wrist with no difficulties, plenty of links, but they should have lengthened the clasp and added a 5mm ease-link style extension to give some on-the-fly adjustment. The rivet link bracelet does feel comfortable, it articulates well and it is finished to a good standard. The female pivoted end links give a good snug fit to the wrist because they pull the end link in the rivet link bracelet close to the wrist. Nice curved undercut to the case, so if you have a smaller wrist of 6 to 7 inches, you'll find this fits you very well because it has a relatively short lug to lug measurement of only 45.4. Now for a larger wrist of 7 to 8 inches, you'll find that this is undersized because 48mm is the sweet spot. That is the perfect lug to lug measurement, regardless of whether you have a 6 to 7 inch wrist or a 7 to 8 inch wrist respectively. At 45.4 lug to lug, it is a short case, and also bearing in mind it's a 38mm head of the piece. I think that they should have lengthened the case to 48 because that would have suited all wrist sizes. At 45.4, this is only really suitable for a 6 to 7 inch wrist. On a positive note, they've got the thickness correct. 12.9 is very good because anything under 13mm will easily slip underneath a shirt cuff, and that makes this piece an ideal daily wear piece. It feels very well balanced. Now it is a heavy piece with all the links in the rivet link bracelet. It's 161 grams. And really, for a 39 or 40mm, I would expect it to be circa 150. This is only 38mm head of the piece, but it's 161 grams, and therefore it does feel slightly top heavy rather than being balanced. The reason why it's heavy is because they've used the incorrect taper, 20 down to 18. The bracelet feels too thick and therefore too heavy. Had they made this 20 down to 16, which is the perfect taper, they could have reduced the heft by circa 10 grams. And that would have made it better balanced. The head of the piece would have better balanced the bracelet. At 38mm, it looks like the head of the piece is undersized for the thick bracelet. If this were a 40 or 42, then yes, 20 down to 18 would be well balanced. But when one has a 38 or a 39mm head of the piece, it needs to have a 20 to 16 taper to balance. 20 to 18 looks too straight and parallel, and it really does feel like the head of the piece doesn't balance with the bracelet. The bracelet feels too thick and heavy for a very lightweight head of the piece. And the cumulative effect of having the heavy bracelet is it is 161 grams rather than being circa 150. So it's balanced okay, but there is room for improvement. They could refine the bracelet. It would be a good time when they're making the V2 bracelet with the oyster links in the end, they should really change the proportions from 20 to 16, but of course they're not going to do that. They'll leave it at 18 to minimise production expense. So aesthetically pleasing, the white dial does contrast very well with the black ceramic bezel insert, but as you can see it really does need AR coating because it's very shiny and reflective. The mirror polished rehorts and the mirror polished applied indices and Mercedes hands all compound each other, so it's a shame they didn't use black hands and black indices with AR coating and a brushed satin finish rehort, because that would really have reduced the reflective nature. As you can see, legibility is poor. Right, so let's do a lume test and we'll see how the lume performs when it's charged up to the absolute maximum. So as always, I'm going to use my 100 UV LED torch to charge it up to the absolute peak. Right, so that's now fully charged, and as you can see, initially the C3 Luminova looks okay. It looks like 5 to 6 layers, but in actual fact it's 2 to 3 layers, and that will quickly become apparent because it's going to fade and quickly fade to nothing. The lume pip, the applied indices and the Mercedes hands have a good colour match. The C3 looks the same green tone. But however, this clearly isn't C3 Super Luminova. I think they should have used C3 Super Luminova, alternatively BGW9. This is clearly Luminova, which is less expensive and therefore a cost-cutting measure. And it's clearly 2 to 3 layers versus 5 to 6. You can see that the lume pip is now beginning to fade quickly to nothing, and that's an indication that it's Luminova rather than Super Luminova. The applied indices are also fading quicker than the handset. And again, that's an indication of 2 to 3 layers rather than 5 to 6. So although the green tone is aesthetically pleasing, really it's a shame that they used the cost-cutting measure of the 2 to 3 layers and they didn't use Super Luminova. I think that collectors would be happy to pay an additional €5 to €10 on the retail price had they upgraded to BGW9 or C3 Super Luminova to enhance the specification. Right, so let's discuss the movement used. You'll all be familiar with the Seiko NH38A automatic. It has 24 joules, it runs at 21,600 vibrations per hour and a frequency of 3 Hz. It has hand winding and hacking, which use all complications. 40-hour power reserve is perfectly acceptable. The stated accuracy of the NH35A is -20 to +40 seconds per day, so a rather wide accuracy range. This one is running consistently at +12 seconds per day when it's fully wound to its maximum 40 hours. Now, although +12 is within the -20 to +40 stated accuracy, it's not very impressive. It's running fast. I would prefer to see this regulated to within ±10 seconds per day, or ideally ±5. It is possible to regulate a 35A to within ±5 per day. +12 really isn't good regulation. That is fast. So disappointing regulation, and it's a shame that Cadisen aren't better regulating the 35As they're using. And as I've detailed, this would be better if it used the NH38 because that would delete the phantom date setting position rather than having it with the extra click on the crown. But having said that, the 35A is a reliable, well-proven workhorse movement. It is reasonably accurate when it's well regulated, and I think it's a correct choice at this price point. So lastly, I'll summarise the piece. What do I think of it overall? Well, when I'm considering reviewing a watch on my channel, the watch should meet 2 criteria. It should be both excellent quality and excellent value at the respective price point. So really, to evaluate this piece, one needs to study the quality of the finishing throughout. Now, there are areas on this piece, the head of the piece and the bracelet, that disappoint. If you look at the mirror polishing to the body of the solid mill clasp, you can see there are ripples in the machining underneath the mirror polished body. And this is the kind of cost-cutting measure with regards to production costs that I dislike to see at circa €150. This is €157. Now, on a steel dive SD 1953 or a Pagani design PD 1661, which are less expensive, the quality of the machining and the mirror polishing is better because one doesn't get these kind of ripples. If you look, when I tilt it in the light, you can see that there's poor quality machining underneath. And it's the same with the head of the piece. There are micro scratches to the flanks to the brushed satin finishing, which is longitudinal. Now this is a brand new piece. There shouldn't be any scratches to the flanks whatsoever, but we have micro scratches in the flanks. And throughout the bracelet, if you look at the links, there are also some micro scratches. And again, this is wholly unacceptable on a brand new piece. and I really think there's room for improvement. For example, if you look here in the end link in the bracelet, you can see there are some scuffs and scratches. So really there's room for improvement. There's clear cost-cutting measures with regards to the mirror polishing and also the brushed satin finishing to the head of the piece, the bracelets, and also the bezel. Now I appreciate this isn't a San Martin costing €250. We're not looking at an SN004G. But if you look at the gear tooth, they are finished to an OK standard. There's no sharp edges to the top of the teeth. But the actual quality of the finishing to the teeth is substandard. Really, they need to improve upon it, because at this price point, €157, they are competing with better finished pieces. The PD1661 has a better finished scalloped bezel, and the Steel Dive SD1953 also has a better finished scalloped bezel. So the gear tooth bezel, although it doesn't have sharp points, the quality of the finishing to the teeth isn't impressive. I think that they need to improve upon it. The female pivoted end links do articulate okay, but however, we have play in all the links in the Rivet Link bracelet. Up and down play, side to side play, and also longitudinal play, and it's a rattly bracelet as a result. We've got significant play in all the 1.6mm links, and I'll just check the other side for comparison. Again, we have lateral side play, up and down play, and longitudinal play, so the bracelet rattles. So it's a disappointing bracelet on a good finished piece, or good finished head of the piece, and I've already detailed the disappointment with the clasp, but credit where credit is due, they have acknowledged the defect and they are rectifying the micro adjustment not working. So for these reasons, I cannot recommend the piece at €157. I think there are better alternatives. I think it's worth paying the extra for a San Martin SN004G. Alternatively, at the same price point, I think the PD1661 or the SD1953 are better alternatives. So I'm going to declare it OK quality and OK value. I hope you've enjoyed my review of the Cadisen C8206. Please feel free to post your own comments below the video. Thank you very much.